Chapter 22. There was very little they could see through the fog that had gradually enveloped their boat. Damianos had lowered anchored as soon as they were in sight of Key Largo's marina, and had lit the fog lights throughout and around the decks before he had joined Malou and the children in the cabin. Gabby was rummaging through the contents of the small fridge with an air of disgust marring her lovely face. "Haven't you got anything decent to eat in this boat?" she asked Damianos, turning her head up to him. "There isn't even one stick of celery or tomato in here, just bread, sausages, and something that looks like a soup of some sort." "Sorry, my dear," Damianos replied, chuckling. "I forgot to do the shopping last time we were ashore." "What about the freezer?" Malou asked. "There might be some fish we could fry in some oil," she suggested. "Maybe there's a pizza too," Daniel said helpfully. "I sure could eat something." "Since I see that you're all hungry," Damianos went on, "why don't I take you all to a restaurant for a bite?" "Grand idea," Stefano exclaimed. "How about we return to the tea room?" "Oh, stop it," Gabby flared. "You know I love you to death, dear brother, but I don't think I could stand another session of tea and cakes tonight, thank you very much." "Well, Damianos, what is it going to be then?" Malou asked, throwing a glance at their grinning cat. "I think you might enjoy the place, Malou." And with a snap of his fingers, the five of them were sitting around a table at the terrace of a restaurant in Carita at the edge of the Indian Ocean. "Good Lord," Malou exclaimed. "This is the place where we stayed after our horrible trip aboard that old sampan." She fixed her gaze on Damianos. "Why here? I hope you're not thinking of having us relive that tempestuous journey, are you?" "No, nothing of the sort, my dear." "But this is gorgeous, Mum," Gabby said, standing up to look out at the crab-like structures erected in the water near the beach with their fog lamps burning brightly under the moonlit night. "What are those for?" Daniel asked. "They look like giant spiders," Stefano remarked, coming to stand beside Gabby. "They're lobster and crab traps," Malou exclaimed, while pointing to the lamp at the top of the structure closest to them. "The light attracts the crustaceans to the structure that they get caught inside some creels at the foot of each of those bamboo legs." She returned her attention to Damianos. "So why have you brought us here?" "Well, since you like fresh seafood and I quite like fish myself, I thought this would be the perfect place to enjoy both. In a natural setting, away from the tea room." He threw a glance to Gabby. "Would that be okay if I ordered a plate of seafood, some bread and fruit for dessert?" "What are you waiting for?" Gabby said, laughing. "I can't wait. It sounds like a meal fit for a king, or a princess, I should say." Once they regained the apartment later that afternoon, Dan's attitude was one of frustration. "I can't remember anything else," he said for the upteenth time, as Gustavo brought him a beer from the fridge and sat down across from him. "I can see a few images of Venezuela, where we lived before coming to America, but then going to high school and of course college, but restoring that Porsche is like I've never done something like that before. Could you imagine doing something that complex and then not remembering it?" "I think you're closing your mind to the possibilities, Dan," Gustavo answered. "What do you mean by that?" Dan asked. "Just because you're surprised to see what you obviously have done doesn't mean that you couldn't do it again or even remember what you've done. Are you telling me that I should start restoring another car? Perhaps not another car, no, but going to a restorer or some garages that do that sort of thing could help you in recalling what you've done or how you did it." Gustavo drank a long gulp of his beer. "But I wasn't living here when I did." "No, but I'm sure you're not the only person around here who's been into doing that kind of thing, are you?" "I suppose not." "Well then, why don't you venture to one of these garages and see what they're doing?" Gustavo paused. "I won't be able to help you on that one tomorrow. I'm sure Nicholas could be on hand if you call him nicely in the morning." He chuckled. "Why are you laughing?" Dan asked, still a bit annoyed. "It's because I can picture our St. Nicholas going to get his hands dirty in his white suit all blotchy while working with you on a car." Dan had to laugh too. Indeed, seeing Nicholas sliding under a vehicle was an image to behold. "Yeah, I guess you're right. I'll check the phone book and see where they've got a restorer's garage around here." It was Dan's turn to start relaxing a little. He drank some beer. "But I wish I could see some other things I did." "Well, that's my department," Nicholas said, suddenly appearing beside Dan on the sofa. "I think you and I will have a few places to visit in the morning," he declared, reclining to the back of the seat. "How do you feel about getting your hands dirty?" Gustavo asked, hiding his grin behind the lip of his bottle. Now, Gustavo, I'll have you know, I used to get my hands into everything when I was a lad." "That's it," Dan erupted all of a sudden. "Getting my hands into everything, that's one of the things my dad used to tell me when I wanted to fix something around the house." "And you did, didn't you, MacGyver?" Nicholas said to Dan, smiling. "I saw you getting your hands into house plumbing. Do you remember fixing faucets and plugged drains?" "Absolutely," Dan answered, excited now. I couldn't stop searching for things to do. Exactly. And you did most things very well, I must admit. As the five of them were walking along the beach after dinner, Gabby was the first to notice a fog bank advancing toward the shore. Look, Mum, she said, pointing at the seemingly impenetrable veil. It's like a cloud coming to take us away. Malou turned her head in the direction of the ocean just before they were all transported to some other shore, to another time. Hanging on for dear life onto Stefano's arm when Gabby dared open her eyes, they were all assembled in a lavishly decorated boudoir inside some old house they surely didn't recognise. Before they could ask Damianos what they were doing here, a door opened and a woman walked decisively toward them. Her long brown hair was tied in a ponytail, and her casual allure didn't give away the fame that accompanied her everywhere she went. "Ah, my dear children, there you are," she exclaimed with a flourish, her voice laced of a strong Italian accent. "I was afraid you wouldn't find your way in this horrible fog." Malou looked at Damianos inquisitively while the children stared awkwardly. "Let me introduce Miss Cecilia Bartoli to everyone," he said, beaming. Oh, yes, of course," Celia said. "I'm so sorry. Where are my manners?" "This is Mrs. Politano, her daughter Gabby, and her two sons Stefano and Daniel," Damianos went on. "My pleasure," Cecilia replied, bowing slightly. "And has Damianos informed you why you're here?" She looked at each of them in turn. "I guess he's not," she added, seeing the blank look on their faces. "No matter." She extended an arm in the direction of the door from which she came out. "Why don't you follow me in their studio?" "Who's she?" Daniel whispered in Gabby's ear. She shrugged in response. Malou, who had recognized the name, answered instead. "She is a famous opera singer, Daniel." "And now I'd like to hear your voice of yours, Gabby. Would you mind singing something for me?" Cecilia asked as she sat down at the grand piano in the middle of a very spacious room. "But, Miss Bartoli," Gabby objected timidly, "I've never sang opera. I've heard that you have a beautiful voice, no matter what tune you're singing. Now, if you would indulge me and sing a few bars for me, you choose the tune and I'll accompany you." Gabby, who had advanced to the side of the piano, turned to look at her mother. She wished she was back on the beach. "You go, Gabby. You don't have another opportunity like this one when we go home," Malou replied encouragingly, while she and her son sat down in the chairs lining the far wall. As soon as Gabby began singing, she felt as if transported on stage somewhere and facing an adoring audience. She was no longer afraid. All shyness seemed to have abandoned her. As the saying goes, she let her hair down and sang her heart out. She was absolutely magnificent. Her mother and brothers had never heard her sing like that. They were simply in awe. Once she finished the song, Gabby bowed and turned to Cecilia. "Thank you so much, Miss Bartoli. That was fantastic." Cecilia got up from her seat at the piano and went to take Gabby's hand. "You know, I was a timid child like you when I started singing. I was always afraid people would not like my voice and demean my talent with acrimonious remarks, and it's only when my music teacher told me to sing for God and not for the audience that I began to understand and accept my talent. You see, God has given you a tremendous voice, a gift not to be denied or hidden. So, and if you're grateful for what he has given you, sing your joy to him without restraints." She smiled and embraced her. Gabby was overwhelmed. She began letting the tears course down her face, down her cheeks, and only nodded when Cecilia released her. Turning to her mother and her brothers, she looked up at Damianos. "How did you know?" she asked him. "I didn't, my dear, but someone knew and told me you needed a friend of the arts to let you know how gifted you are." After thanking Cecilia for her time and the advice, Gabby and her family made their way out of the building to find themselves transported to their boat. Once they were back in the cabin below deck and getting ready to spend the night aboard the cruiser, Stefano asked Damianos, "And what do you have in store for me?" "No need asking me, Stefano," Damianos replied. "God only knows what plans he has in reserve for you." "Maybe some beauty is waiting for you at the marina in Key Largo," Daniel said, jabbing his brother in the ribs. "Oh, stop that, Daniel," Stefano said. "Besides, I'm not the flirt you think I am." "Oh, no? And who wanted to return to the tea house to meet Liana again, eh?" "Well, that's different. She reminded me of someone I knew, that's all." "Okay, kids, it's time to quit for the night, I think," Malou declared. "Let's go to bed and see what tomorrow will bring us, okay?"